Hello again. Now, in this lecture, I'm trying to trace the development of the events and actions in Wuthering Heights, dividing the story into phases. In each phase, there is a group of events and actions, and characters' relations and development of the uh, incidents. Now, starting with the first phase, which is about the story of two families. And Wuthering Heights is the story of two families, in fact, the Earnshaw family and the Linton family. And there is an outsider who has the name of Heathcliff. The Earnshaw family, which lives at a place called Wuthering Heights, consists of Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw and their children, two, Hindley and Catherine, or Cathy. The Linton family lives at a place called the Thrushcross Grange. This place is situated at a distance of about 4 miles from Wuthering Heights. It is down in the valley and consists of Mr. and Mrs. Linton and their two children also, Edgar and Isabella. On one of his visits to the city of Liverpool, Mr. Earnshaw picks up an unknown, dirty and dragged child from a slum and brings him home to Wuthering Heights to be brought up there. This child is given the name of Heathcliff. Although Mr. Earnshaw himself dotes on the strange black-haired and black-eyed boy, and although the girl Cathy rapidly becomes intimate with him, all other inmates of the house, especially the boy Hindley, feel hostile to him. The boy Heathcliff is cruelly treated by Hindley, who is older, and Heathcliff begins to think in terms of revenge upon his tormentor. So we have three phases. The first phase is an introduction of the two families, and the second phase is the bringing of Heathcliff to the family, and the third phase is what is the clash between Hindley and Heathcliff. Now, a new phase we have here, which is Hindley's marriage. As the children now grow up, Hindley is sent to college, while Cathy and Heathcliff often roam freely upon the moors. On one occasion, stray as far as Thrushcross Grange, where Cathy is received as an equal, but Heathcliff is turned away as a social outcast. Cathy becomes quite intimate with the Linton children, Edgar and Isabella. By the time Earnshaw dies, Hindley has already got married to a girl called Frances, whom he brings home to Wuthering Heights when he finds it necessary to come there to attend his father's funeral. Soon afterwards, Frances gives birth to a child which is given the name of Hareton, and she herself dies a couple of months later. So this is phase number 4. Phase number 5 is precisely concerned with Heathcliff's disappearance. Now, Hindley gets into the habit of drinking. Edgar proposes marriage to Cathy, and she accepts the proposal. Although Cathy is really in love with Heathcliff, she tells the housekeeper Nellie that it would be degrading for her to marry him, and that she has accepted the marriage proposal of Edgar Linton. Heathcliff overhears a part of this conversation between Cathy and Nellie, and he leaves Wuthering Heights and disappears, to the great dismay of Cathy. Mr. and Mrs. Linton of Thrushcross Grange also die, having caught a fever from Cathy when she was convalescing as a guest at the Grange. Now we move to phase 6. 3 years later, Edgar and Cathy are married, and a few months afterwards, Heathcliff suddenly reappears on the scene. There is a transformation in Heathcliff's appearance and manners also. He looks almost handsome and dignified. He is now a rich man, though it is not clear how he has become rich. Heathcliff visits Cathy at the Grange, and Cathy is overjoyed to see him. Edgar's indifferent manner hurts the feelings of Cathy, who wanted that Edgar should receive him as a family friend on equal terms. Phase 7. Isabella, the sister of Edgar, falls in love with Heathcliff. Although Heathcliff is still deeply and passionately in love with Cathy, he offers some encouragement to Isabella because such a step suits his own designs. There is an angry scene between Cathy and Heathcliff, and then between Edgar and Heathcliff, and then between Cathy and Edgar. Cathy would have liked to continue as Edgar's faithful wife, keeping Heathcliff as a kind of a friend, or maybe lover, if it were possible for her to reconcile these two positions. But Edgar cannot tolerate the presence of Heathcliff in his house because he regards Heathcliff as a scoundrel. Cathy falls dangerously ill because of the stress and strain of the situation and recovers very slowly. In the meantime, Isabella elopes with Heathcliff and marries him. So in this particular phase, we find that Heathcliff starts thinking about taking revenge through Isabella. And also we find that Cathy is still in love with Heathcliff, which is phase 8. Now, phase 9 is how Heathcliff barbarous treatment of Isabella. 2 months later, Heathcliff and Isabella, now a man and wife, return to Wuthering Heights, where Heathcliff had been staying as Hindley's guest. Hindley had welcomed Heathcliff as his guest because he had got heavily in debt as a result of his drinking and gambling habits, and because Heathcliff was now a rich man who could afford to lend him money to meet his liabilities. Heathcliff has not married Isabella for love. He has married her to wreak vengeance upon Edgar Linton and partly to lay a claim to Isabella's share in the family estate. He therefore begins to ill-treat Isabella and to insult her at the same time, so that Isabella begins to look upon him almost as a monster. Now we move to phase 10, which is concerned with Cathy's death and how Heathcliff became very grieved. Heathcliff pays a secret visit to the ailing Cathy. There is a passionate scene between the two. Cathy tells him that he is killing her because of the way he has behaved, while he points out to her that she herself is responsible for her misery. Heathcliff is convinced that Cathy could never have been happy as Edgar's wife, and that he could have loved Cathy more in one day than Edgar could have loved her in 80 years. That very night, Cathy dies after giving birth to a baby girl who is given the name Catherine. Heathcliff's grief is indescribable. He believes that he cannot live without Cathy. And these are the words spoken by Heathcliff himself after her death. "Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul." And now he said these words on hearing about Cathy's death, and he dashes his head against the knotted trunk of a tree. Phase 11 witnesses 3 major events, which is the death of Hindley, Isabella's escape, and Heathcliff's superiority. Isabella, unable to endure the continuing brutal treatment of Heathcliff, flees from Wuthering Heights, and after meeting Nellie at the Grange, she departs for an unknown destination in the south, where she gives birth to a child named Linton. Hindley now becomes totally dependent of Heathcliff and begins to drink even more heavily. On one occasion, he plans to kill Heathcliff and attacks him with a knife, but is overpowered by Heathcliff and severely thrashed and beaten. Finally, he dies of sheer drinking, leaving his estate in the hands of Heathcliff, with whom it had been wholly mortgaged. The guest has now become the master of Wuthering Heights. Now, in phase 12, this is the coming of Hareton into the family. Hindley's son Hareton has grown up under the guardianship of Heathcliff, who sees it that the boy receives no education at all and is encouraged to behave like a brute. Heathcliff has brought up the boy in this manner in order to take his revenge from Hindley, who used to maltreat him when Heathcliff himself was a child. Phase 13. The friendship between Catherine's daughter, and Linton, Isabella's and Heathcliff's son. About 12 years passing, Catherine is now grown up. Also, Linton is also grown up, and Edgar brings the boy to the Grange so that he can grow up in the company of Catherine. But as soon as Heathcliff learns that his son by Isabella has been brought to the Grange, he obtains custody of the boy and has him removed to Wuthering Heights under his own charge. Linton is a delicate, sickly, and timid boy. Heathcliff cannot love a son who is so unlike him, but he has a plan in his mind by which he hopes to acquire the entire property of Thrushcross Grange. Edgar, who has been feeling heartbroken over the death of his wife, Cathy, is now not in good health and is not expected to live very long. Phase 14 is about the marriage of Catherine and Linton. Heathcliff's plan is to bring about a matrimonial alliance between his son Linton and Edgar's daughter Catherine, who will inherit all her father's property at his death. While normally also Edgar could have had no objection to the marriage of Catherine and Linton, he cannot allow his daughter Catherine to visit Wuthering Heights where Linton lives, because Edgar is absolutely convinced that Heathcliff is a rogue and a scoundrel. Heathcliff therefore contrives a meeting between Catherine and young Linton and creates in Catherine a tender feeling for the young man. Then one day he lures both Catherine and her governess Nellie to Wuthering Heights, where he imprisons them and where he gets his son Linton married to Catherine, very much against Nellie's wishes. While Nellie is thereafter released, Catherine is detained at Wuthering Heights because she is now Mrs. Linton Heathcliff, and because in that capacity she must remain there, even though she is planning to go there and to be back to see her father, who is dying at the Grange. Now, phase 15 witnesses Heathcliff's cunning to possess Thrushcross Grange. Catherine manages to escape from Wuthering Heights and reaches the Grange just in time to see her father, who is on his deathbed. There is a touching scene between father and daughter, but the father dies blissfully because his daughter is by his side. Soon after Edgar's funeral, Heathcliff arrives at the Grange and declares himself to be the owner of this estate, and also because with the death of Edgar the property belongs to Catherine and therefore to Linton, Heathcliff's son. He then takes Catherine away to Wuthering Heights because he says he has decided to let the property at the Grange to a tenant. Phase 16 is about the development of the friendship between Catherine, who is now a widow, and Hareton, Hindley's son. Young Linton, as was foreseen, dies prematurely. Catherine finds herself friendless and comfortless. Now Hindley's son Hareton, who is still coarse in his habits and a brute in his behavior, begins to feel interested in Catherine. At first Catherine feels enraged by his attentions, but in the course of time she too begins to feel interested in him. Hareton's manners begin to improve, and Catherine begins to give him lessons in reading. Nelly thinks that it would be fine if these two could get married, because she sees no other future for Catherine. Now, phase 17. In this phase, we find that Heathcliff is giving up the idea of revenge. Heathcliff's revenge upon the two families is almost complete, but not really complete. He has become the master of both the estates. Both Hindley, the owner of Wuthering Heights, and Edgar, the owner of Thrushcross Grange, have died miserable deaths. Hindley's son Hareton has been brought up as a brute and is under the complete domination of Heathcliff. Edgar's daughter Catherine is now the widow of Heathcliff's own son, Linton, and she too is under his complete control. In fact, on one occasion when he speaks in an insulting manner to him, he seizes her by the hair and could even have killed her. Now a change comes up in this man. He tells Nelly that it is in his power to destroy the two remaining representatives of the two families. Both Hareton, the sole surviving representative of the Earnshaw family, and Catherine, the sole surviving representative of the Linton family, are at his mercy. But Heathcliff has now lost the capacity to enjoy the exercise of his power to destroy people, so he becomes indifferent to the developing intimacy between Catherine and Hareton. Phase 18 is about Heathcliff's suffering and agony under the influence of memories of Cathy. He is totally haunted by her ghost. Heathcliff is now obsessed by one thought, the thought of Cathy, whom he had loved and lost. Thoughts of revenge upon the two families now give way to this governing and haunting idea that Cathy had once existed and that he had been deprived of her. He tells Nelly that for the last 18 years memories of Cathy have tormented him. It has been a long fight, he says, and now he wants that the fight should end. It is obvious that Heathcliff's conscience has now begun to trouble him a lot, and that he can no longer continue his savage cruelty. His thoughts now turn inwards, and he sees only Cathy's image in every object. Phase 19 is about Heathcliff's instructions concerning his death and the burial and the coming event. Heathcliff's behavior now undergoes such a change that Nelly begins to think that he is not a human being at all, but either a ghoul or a vampire. He begins to talk of his death, and he gives the necessary instructions to Nelly about his burial. He has already arranged with the sexton that his dead body should be buried close to that of Cathy. When Nelly urges him to repent of his injustices, he replies that he has done no injustice and that he repents of nothing. One night, Heathcliff is heard muttering to himself and pacing his room in a state of restlessness. It has been raining throughout the night, and Heathcliff has allowed the window of his room to remain open. In the morning, when Nelly peeps into the room, she finds him dead and stuck. Heathcliff has died with his eyes open. Nelly tries to close his eyes, but they don't shut. Heathcliff is then buried in accordance with his instructions. Although Nelly does feel sad at Heathcliff's death, it was Hareton who was the only person really suffers deeply and who weeps bitterly to have lost his patron. Phase 20, it is about the ghost of both Heathcliff and Cathy. Afterwards, different people claim that they have seen Heathcliff's ghost roaming about on the moors. Some even say that they have seen two ghosts, Heathcliff's and Cathy's, roaming about together, and if the love of Heathcliff and Cathy couldn't be fulfilled during their lifetime, it is fulfilled after their deaths. This is the belief. Not only do their bodies lie close to each other in the underground, but their spirits also move about together. Now, the last phase is about the marriage of Hareton to Catherine. Catherine and Hareton, who had been getting closer to each other, now decide to get married. But after marriage, they will not live at Wuthering Heights, but at the Thrushcross Grange. Thus, the novel, which on the whole is gloomy and somber, comes to happy close with this marriage and with the reunion of Heathcliff and Cathy.